Squadron's Commander Redacted. So this is going to be part 2 of our introduction into LOC slash visual link. And in this video, I'm going to go over the specific responsibilities and job of individual LOCs, or lines of communication. Obviously, this is building off of part 1, so if you have not watched part 1 to the series, go ahead and watch that, where in that video I describe exactly what visual link is and what LOC is. So going briefly back to that first video, an LOC is the guy who connects a specific element of a team to at least one other element of the team. So as the team is breaking off into several different elements as they're clearing a structure, the LOC is the guy who connects that element to at least one other element in the team visually. So that way each element of that team, even though they're broken off and divided into different rooms and so forth in the structure, they are connected visually to each other via LOCs. So that way, although they're technically separated, they're still visually linked to each other, which is why this tactic is commonly referred to as visual link. So there are 4 main responsibilities to individual LOCs. Number 1 is to create and maintain a link of their element with the rest of the team. So they maintain link. So number 1, they build or create linkage and maintain that linkage to at least one other element of the team, therefore maintaining visual link with the rest of the team. Number 2 is to control their immediate element. So the guys that he is responsible for, he basically he needs to maintain control of them, making sure that they're not doing something they're not supposed to do, like working a follow-on door without being ordered to do so, etc. So he has control over his immediate element to make sure that they're safe and not doing something they're not supposed to do, or giving them orders to do something in the event that they need to do something. So yeah, they control their immediate element. Number 3 is to become a primary controller when appropriate. I'll talk more about that here in a few minutes, but one LOC is going to become what is known as a primary controller, meaning he's going to make the next decision as to what the team is going to do, what door they're going to work next, how many men need to be dedicated to that door, etc. He's going to become essentially the primary decision maker to the next move of the team as a whole. And then finally, number 4, control the movement and positioning of forward and rear security when applicable. So obviously the most forward element of the team is typically going to have the forward security guy. So that LOC attached to that element, he is responsible for making sure that that guy who is maintaining forward security is safe and in good position, etc. So he will actually physically move him where he needs to be. Also, for the most rear element, that rear element will obviously have the rear security guy attached to them. So the LOC attached to that element, he is responsible for rear security and making sure that he's in proper positioning and generally in the best place. And he's also responsible for literally physically moving him where he needs to be. Again, that'll be demonstrated here in this I'm blanking on the word now, but that'll be showed here in this video in Door Kickers 2 here in a moment. So those are the 4 main responsibilities of LOCs. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this video and run it through and talk about it as it happens, so to speak. So point, they work the door, they're all stacked up. They're all a single element right now. Now they split off. So this guy right here, he pushes into the doorway, into this threshold, and he is going to become an LOC. So he's connecting this element right here to these guys right here. Okay, let me go back here slightly. Okay, so let's talk about quickly who becomes an LOC. Well, typically, typically it's going to become, if we've dedicated 3 guys to work a door and enter the room, it is going to become um, it's going to become the 3rd guy, because after the number 1 man, number 2 man make entry, that room is probably clear. If there's follow-on threats, number 1 man, number 2 man are probably already working them by the time you even enter the room, or at least maintain security on it or whatever. So generally speaking, it's going to become the number 3 man. So in this case, uh, these 2 right here, these were the number 1, number 2 man, so they make entry. And this guy is going to just assume he's going to become controller, so he's going to assume immediate controller responsibilities. So at this point, he's actually going to push up to forward security, and in real life, he would just grab his the back of his plate carrier and literally pull him and move him, physically move him to where he needs to be, because this guy should not be looking around, trying to decide where he should be or where his best or the safest place for him to be. His eyes and his gun are locked forward, and that's his sole responsibility. It is someone else's responsibility, i.e., his nearest LOC, to move him where he needs to be. So he doesn't. He's basically like a turret that just holds forward security, and if he needs to be moved, it is someone else's responsibility to actually move him. So at this point, this guy, who is going to become the LOC of this immediate element, he is going to push up and physically move him after he gets done murking these guys where he needs to be. So he's going to pull him back to this threshold and put him into this threshold so he can maintain forward security. Typically, I'm going to talk about this more in detail in another video, but typically we want our forward and rear security elements to be in thresholds if we can. Then the LOC would just lean around him through the threshold and communicate with the other LOCs. Obviously, if there's not enough room to do so, then he would just have the 4 guy push out just slightly out of the threshold so he can work within the threshold. But generally speaking, this is better. I'll talk more into details on why that is in another video, but that's what happened here. So at this point, we now have 2 LOCs. This guy in the green here, and this guy. So this LOC connects to this LOC, and this LOC right here, he's responsible for this element, and this LOC is responsible for this element. Again, the number 1 priority, the number 1 responsibility for an LOC is to create and maintain linkage between the elements of the entire team. So this guy connects this element to this guy, which connects them to this element. Okay, so now let's talk about primary controllers. So, like I said, LOCs have the responsibility to control their element. So this is primarily going to mean making sure they're not pushing too far. They're not working doors they're not supposed to, and so forth, right? So this element is this LOC's responsibility. So they shouldn't do this anyways, but he's going to make sure and order these 2 guys right here, to not work this door until ordered to do so, although they should already know that. But again, they're his responsibility. This guy's responsibility, this LOC's responsibility. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So, and then this guy, this LOC right here, these guys are his responsibility. So he does the same thing. He makes sure they're not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing, make sure they're somewhere safe, etc., etc., right? Now, moving on from there, we have something that's going to be known as a primary controller. And a primary controller is going to be the LOC which has the best vantage point over the situation as a whole. Now, as a general rule, this is generally going to be the most forward LOC, which obviously would be this guy. Generally speaking, not always. There's exceptions to every rule, but as a general rule, it's going to be the most forward LOC because he's going to have the most information and the best vantage point of the situation as a whole. And what the primary controller does is he makes basically the next decision as to the next move of the team. So in this case, this guy right here would be the primary controller. So he has a decision to make. He knows that we have a door right here that needs to be worked, and that he has follow-on doors down this hallway, and he knows the positioning of the rest of the team. So he knows, obviously, where the element that he's responsible for is, obviously, but he also knows that because there's an LOC right here, he knows that there's people in this hallway. So at this point, he needs to make a decision. And typically, the decision for primary controllers is going to be what door or what room to work next. So I'm going to talk about in another video what goes into making that decision. But again, that's going to be another video. I won't go into it here, just to make this video more specific towards LOCs and not to make it too long. So at this point, this LOC, he's going to order these two guys right here, to go ahead and work this door and clear this room. Okay, so that room is clear and it terminates, meaning there's no follow-on doors or anything like that. So at that point, we no longer have to worry about this room. These two guys just consolidate back, and they're just going to basically wait here until ordered to do something. So they're basically on break, if you will. Now at this point, this controller has the next, now needs to make another decision, right? So now he knows that obviously this room is no longer a factor, so that's good. So we have two follow-on doors. So we have this door right here that's open, and then this door. So he's going to make a decision on which one we're going to work first. Now, in this case, the most obvious and the correct decision is going to be to work this door. Now, at this point, he has to determine how much manpower he wants to dedicate to this room. That's going to also be his decision. Now, going back to our last video, generally speaking, we want at least two guys to work a door / enter a room at minimum. So we want a minimum of two guys to work a door and enter a room. Preferably three if we have the manpower. Now there's other decisions to be made, obviously. So he has to kind of do a little bit of math here. So he knows that if he's going to make a decision to work this door. So he knows that we need at least two guys to enter this room right here to clear it. He also knows that forward security needs to be maintained. So that's at least three guys right there. But there's other hitches here as well. He knows that there's a closed door here that needs to have a security held on it as people make entry into this room. So that's another guy. So that's four. And at this point, again, it's generally best if we have the manpower to spare to add a third guy to this, because at the very minimum, that third guy can become an immediate LOC. So with all that in mind, again, I'll go into more details on more details onto the decision making of LOCs in a separate video. But at this point, he's going to go ahead and he's going to call up for +4. So forward security, he knows that's already one dedicated to this task. So he needs 4 other guys, which conveniently enough, there's 4 guys here. So this LOC is just going to tell these guys right here to go ahead and push out and stack up behind forward security. After that dude gets murked. Now in this case, we're going to be holding rear security as well. So once this element passes, he as in this LOC right here, is going to tell one of these guys to go ahead and push out and fill rear security. So as you can see, that's the job of the primary controller. Now, primary controllers are going to be constantly switching as you clear rooms, as you're going to see here momentarily. So it's never just going to be one guy throughout the entire clearance. It's going to swap hands many, many, many times. Okay, I just want to go back here real quick. Okay, so right now we have two guys stacked up on the door. That's ugly. So we have this guy right here stacked up on the door. We have this guy stacked up on the door. So these two are going to be making entry. This guy's holding security on this door. He's going to push up to the door once they make entry for security, obviously. So this guy right here, he's going to be the third man in, and he's going to assume LOC responsibilities. Now, because he knows that this guy's holding security on his door, again, remember LOC, he has the responsibility of moving and directing forward security, because again, forward and rear security elements should be looking around, having to make decisions for themselves. They should just be focused on forward and rear security. That's their job. So this LOC, he's literally going to go over and physically move him to where he wants to be. So he's going to actually push him up over here so he can better cover this guy. Boop. So he pushes him up, and then he gets into the doorway, and again, creates and maintain linkage to the rest of the elements. So right now, these guys right here, there we go. These guys right here are this LOC's responsibility, and then we have this LOC right here, who is in control of these two guys. So now at this point, again, generally speaking, the most forward LOC is going to become primary controller, which is now going to become this guy, right? At this point, the team is only split up into two separate elements, so this is pretty straightforward and simple right now. Things get a little bit more complicated as you start breaking up into more and more elements, but again, keeping things simple here. So at this point, he has a decision to make, right? Because again, he's primary controller. What's the next decision to be made in terms of what's the next step for the team? So he has basically two options here, right? We can either work this door right here or this door right here. So in this case, he is going to determine that we're going to work this door first for a variety of reasons. Again, I'll make a separate video on that as to not make this too long as to why he would choose this door over this door at this moment. So now that he's decided he wants to work, the team should work this door next. It's now time to dedicate manpower to it. So again, we want a minimum of 2 guys entering a room, preferably 3 if we can spare it. We already have a guy holding forward security. So at this point, he's going to go ahead and call up for +2 on this door. Now, we never leave people alone. So right now, this LOC, right, he's responsible for these guys. So even though he's calling out for +2, he knows he only has 3 guys here. So we're not just going to leave a guy alone. So he's just going to go ahead and push up this entire element to stack up on this door. Even though the LOC only called for +2, again, we never leave guys solo. Everybody has at least a wingman with them. They're a 2-man buddy pair at minimum. So this guy's just going to make the call that all 3 of these guys are going to push up. And again, this guy operating as LOC of this element right now, he is going to go ahead and physically move rear security, because this guy is still going to maintain rear security the entire time. So he actually pushes him out of the doorway, holding onto his plate carrier. We can't do this in ready or not, but I'm just saying it for demonstration purposes, if you will. And then he's literally going to drag him back where he needs to be. Right? You can see he's dragging him back where he needs to be. Boom. Okay. Now that they're in position, this LOC is just going to tell them, LOC and primary controller is going to go ahead and tell them that they are free to work this door. He's going to push out of this doorway, breaking linkage technically, although he still can see these guys potentially. But again, for his own security, because if he just stands here, the moment they open the door, he's basically going to be exposed to the 90-degree, which would be a very stupid place to stand. So he's just going to go ahead and push back out of this threshold to allow these guys to work the door without unneedingly exposing him to threats. Okay, so at this point we had an interesting situation here. So again, number one man, number two man make entry, third man in. He's generally just going to assume that he's become LOC. So, so he again is responsible for the positioning of both forward and rear security, depending if they're near him. So in this case, he actually has responsibility for both of them, because both of them are on the door and the element and within the element that he's responsible for. So he's actually going to move both of these guys where he wants. So he's going to pull rear security back, and then he's going to walk over and pull forward security back to where he wants them. Bang. And then he's going to make, then he's going to put himself into the threshold, and assume LOC responsibilities. Okay, now at this point, we have, again, two LOCs. We have this guy right here and this guy right here. For this situation, this guy is going to remain as primary controller because, again, he is just the best vantage point of the entire situation as a whole, and he still knows that he has a door right here that needs to be worked. So at this point, he's going to call for some more manpower. This guy right here who was holding security on this door, he no longer need to hold security on it because this guy cleared this angle, and we're just going to assume for now that they were able to communicate and say this door is no longer a factor, just for simplicity's sake. So so he gets the manpower. He need one more guy, so we call for +1. Blue over here entered, and now he's got his +1. At this point, he's going to pull back again to put himself in a safe position for these guys to work this door. And he's going to give the order to go ahead and work the door. Okay. All right, so now the team, so like right there, for example, this LOC, his rear security is now his responsibility. So he goes over and he pulls him back physically where he wants him to be and into this threshold like we already talked about. If I could pause this. Okay, so at this point we now have a new LOC on stage. This guy is now the new LOC. So again, being the more forward LOC, he is going to go ahead and assume primary controller. So at this point, he now knows that really the last door of the structure that we know of is going to be this door. So again, we want a minimum of 2 guys to enter the room, preferably 3 if we have it. We don't need forward security anymore, obviously. So he's going to go ahead and call for +2. Now, it's really important, too, to understand that LOCs, as in their name, lines of communication, they transmit information to their elements. So this guy tells this guy right here that we need +2. So this LOC is now going to go talk to this LOC right here. Let me backtrack. So that didn't come out right. So this LOC calls for +2. Calls for +2 to this LOC. So this LOC then tells this LOC that they need +2, and he's going to tell these guys to go ahead and order these guys to go ahead and bump up and give manpower to this guy for the next door. That I probably made that way more confusing than it needed to be. English is hard. All right, so at this point, there's no reason for this guy to be in this doorway, so he's just going to go ahead and consolidate on these guys. Again, I'll talk about this in another video, but LOCs and primary controllers, well, primarily the primary controller, he can also control the positioning of other elements of the team. So right now, he knows that this door is about to get worked, and he doesn't like the fact that these guys are in this room due to hot walling. Again, this is going to become another video. So he's going to go ahead and tell these guys to go ahead and push up into this room to put them in a safer position. So again, this LOC / primary controller, he's going to go ahead and tell this LOC right here that he wants his element to go ahead and push up into this room, and then this LOC would then give that order to these guys. So remember, LOCs control positioning and movement of rear security when they have that guy within their element. So this LOC right here is going to physically move rear security in this case to where he wants him. This guy's going to go ahead and just push up into this room, and then he would reposition him if necessary. Just going to pull him back into the threshold. Boom. All right. Once this element is moved to where this guy wanted them to be, he's going to go ahead and give the order to these guys to go ahead and work this door. Bang. And at that point, now we have 3 LOCs. We have this guy, and this guy. Again, a line of communication. Boom to boom. Obviously, the building's clear at this point, so no need to move. No need to move further. But if the building continued on, it would just be a continuation of this that you've already seen. So yeah, just to quickly recap. So LOCs, their 4 main responsibilities is number 1, to create and maintain link of their element with the rest of the team. Number 2, to control their element. Again, just making sure they're not doing something they're not supposed to do, passing on orders or giving them orders, and so forth. They control their immediate element. Number 3, become primary controller when appropriate, which generally speaking is going to be the most forward LOC. Not always, but as a general rule, the most forward LOC is going to assume primary controller, and obviously do the things that primary controllers do. And then number 4, control movement and positioning of forward and rear security when appropriate. So if either forward and or rear security is part of their element that they're responsible for, they control where he needs to be, and they'll actually physically move him where they want him to be. So that way, forward and rear security don't have to worry about that. They just hold security on wherever they're holding security on, and if they need to be moved, they know that their LOC will actually physically move them where they need to be. So yeah, and that's really it. In terms of LOCs, again, we'll go over in another video what went into their decision making and all that in terms of what doors to work next and all that. There's some rules to that that I'll discuss in a separate video. But yeah, that's really it for for understanding the roles and responsibilities of LOCs and primary controllers. Hopefully this made sense to you guys. If you have any questions, obviously just feel free to reach out to me, shoot me a message or whatever and ask, and I'll be more than happy to answer it. But hopefully this made sense, and I look forward to doing the next video.